No way. Well, let's get started, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's get started. Okay. How about if we introduce ourselves? We have Pat, she's new. I'm Tom Feet. Who are you?
Karen Johnson.
Sandy Beaumont.
Wanda Roselle.
Diane DeGroat.
I'm Pat Girelli.
So glad that you're here, and welcome everybody at home. Everybody in their PJs. All right. Today, as is my habit, Jim's not here because he's been under the weather with a tooth. We team teach usually, so but we're going to take a look at we're a week behind, which is perfect.
I just realized
The syllabus. Did you get a syllabus? You got this? I have my syllabus.
Tonight is.
We're going to be in Matthew chapter 2.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So, I'm warming up here. All right. Let's do a little review. I want to do that every time. So we get this thing. So which of the four Gospels have the? Hey, Mrs. Bennett. Which of the four Gospels have the Christmas stories in it?
Luke and Matthew.
Luke and Matthew.
Oh, you've been studying Karen, right?
Yeah.
Very good.
She was probably one. I mean, she's in the front.
Never
seat,
she
right?
is.
I would have been way back. Sleeping.
Good morning.
How are you, Mrs. Bennett? Good to see you. Well,
They
we just.
finally in the office don't speed. I told them I might be late. I told them I don't know how to.
Well, I think there was a cop that was parked in the cemetery, because just as I come around the corner.
Yeah, they like being in there. Yeah. They do. They like that area, right? So those are the two Gospels. How come the other two don't have them? Have any of those stories?
I don't think their audience was the Jewish population. Was that it?
Okay, that's partly maybe the case. Yeah. If I were to say the Gospels are written backwards, what does that mean when I say that?
You told us last week, but I forgot what you said.
Oh, great, Marion, very nice. So it means that they were initially wanting to get the word out about Jesus's death and resurrection, to make it all real. But
Right.
as time went on, people wanted to know that history of who he was.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they embellished.
Yep, that's right. Everybody got that? Anybody want to add to that?
Well, it was also the time frame. It was like 90 AD that they believed they were written, looking back at, this would be like 33 AD or 30 AD, whatever time.
To make the link.
Oh, yeah.
All right, talk to us about the link. There's a link? What is
Well,
it?
in 85 AD, the Jewish
Karen.
Christians.
If I had any money, I would give it to you. Do you want a car? I'll give you my car. You can have it.
Is that your Audi sitting out there?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's my funeral vehicle. It is, that's right. Usually go to funeral.
Different funerals he does.
I'm not gonna take the Tahoe.
Dirty old Tahoe.
So in 85 AD, the Jewish Christians were expelled from the synagogues. They didn't, the Jewish people did not believe that Christ was the Messiah, and they had enough of them being in the synagogue and causing this rift, I guess. And so in order for for Jesus, to be the Messiah, they had to connect the Old Testament to the New Testament, because in the Old Testament, it said that he was from a certain line of David,
Mhm.
and they had proof with the genealogy that Jesus was indeed of that line.
Mhm. Yep.
And it was to make them legitimate, the Jewish Christians legitimate, I guess.
Okay, yeah, very good. So if I were to say, are these people just making it up? They're just goofing around? They're just, we gotta be legitimate, so we're gonna build this bridge, and we're gonna have our own sort of religious institutions, so let's just make it up and see how it goes. That's a criticism that you'll hear from people. What makes this legitimate?
Well, they can go back to the Old Testament and what the prophets had said.
Yeah, okay, for sure, and you can kind of see it. It's the suffering Messiah. You can see that stuff in Isaiah in that sense. As far as a suffering servant, that's Isaiah 61 or something like that. But is there another compelling reason that makes that bridge work?
We talked to people, interviewed them, and got information from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people,
Who were, I guess, eyewitnesses.
or they were disciples of eyewitnesses. Yeah, there's some of that. I'll just throw it out there. Without the resurrection of Jesus, none of it matters. Just throw it away. Throw the whole thing away. It doesn't. None of it works. It's a joke. It's a canard.
Years ago, I read that most people seem to think Christmas is the most important holiday in the Christian calendar, and it's not.
No.
Easter is the most important holiday because if there were no Easter,
Right.
Christmas, there'd be no reason to
That's
have
right.
Christmas.
That's right. Jesus would just die as a martyr, as a kind of a troublemaker. Like so many. I mean, the Romans were fabulous at killing people, crucifying them. I mean, during holy days, holidays in Jerusalem or wherever, they would just take criminals and just line them up on the street and crucify them. So on your way to town, is their way of, a little hint, can you keep it down this weekend? Okay. Right? So they're good at it. They would light people up later, Christians would, and they would be used as city lighting. You just light them up.
Did they call, they really, okay, right. When they did that, did they call that crucifixion, or did it only become crucifixion of Christ? Was that only?
No, it was crucifixion for everybody. They were all crucified. Yeah, that was kind of their preferred method of, getting the message out. Okay? Without the resurrection, I'll just say it, without the resurrection, none of this matters. Even St. Paul writes, without the resurrection, we are most to be pitied. Because it just doesn't, that's what makes it all hang together. So if you have somebody who's resurrected from the dead, then you can start asking questions like the link then. The resurrection is real. So the linkages will be real too. You see how the logic goes? Yeah? And so the early church in the Gospels and the early church theologically are making these, in Isaiah there's several passages that talk about the coming Messiah. And we see that. So now we're gonna build work on that bridge with those passages, and there are other passages in the Old Testament having to do with the lineage of David, and they're going to make those connections. Now, I'm sad that Jim's not here because I love to watch him gasp when I say things like this. Do any of those things? Do any of the stories, therefore, about the birth of Jesus have to be historically true? No. So if they're not historically true, and this applies to several other places in the Bible, big places, because there are many sections that are historically accurate, like a history book. We would read a history book, yes. that happened. We have archaeologists who are digging down, they can prove, yes, here it is. Here's the evidence. But in certain places, the first 11 chapters of Genesis, I believe, have this quality. They are not historical. The birth stories in the Bible, they may be fashioned as history. Maybe some of it happened. But what they're really going after is theology. And we've got a really good example of it today in Matthew 2, chapter 2. Okay? Can you live with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If the resurrection of Jesus didn't happen, that's a problem. If that's a myth, if that's a story, if that's, you see where I'm going with that? If that didn't happen, and we have over 500 eyewitnesses that saw it, or met him after he rose from the dead, if that didn't happen, that's a problem. But because that happened, then you can be a little more theological about other stories. Okay? If you can hang in there with that. Western people love science, especially with the Iowa. And that was pretty funny, I thought. Or Michigan. Westerners love science, and we love history. If it can't be proved by science, if it can't be proved by history, it's not true. And you hear that all the time. The Bible is way more flexible about truth-telling than Western societies are typically. Although we have movies and things like that are not necessarily historically accurate. Okay, is that enough? Okay? I just kind of want you to get that in your phones a little bit. So let's take a look at Matthew chapter 2. Water. Karen, start with one. I think I have one. Talking too much. Okay. Would someone read verses 1 through 6? You don't mind? Like you mean it?
In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we have observed his star at his rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all of the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you at Bethlehem in the land of Judah are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel."
Okay, thanks. All right, so do you guys, does anyone read your horoscope every day? Anybody do that?
Not every day.
I'm a Libra, which is the best one. I don't know anything more than that. Sort of a pregnant pause there. Is anybody? So you look at your horoscope once in a while, every blue moon. When Mars is in retrograde, I don't know what that means, but people usually say something bad's going to happen. I don't know why. Anybody ever go to a tarot card reader? Anyone admit to it? What about
A psychic.
A psychic? Anybody know a psychic? I've gone once in Poughkeepsie. Yeah, that was something. Yeah, I said, if you get it wrong, I got to stone you to death. I told you that, right? Because that's what they did in the Old Testament. If a prophet gets it wrong, they stone them to death. So you want to kind of watch your words. I said, you probably saw me coming in and knew I was going to say that, right? It was fun. She had it all wrong. I was a pain for it. What do you think of the wise men in this? How did they get there to Jerusalem? By train? Yeah.
So is that what they were? They were kind of like psychics from the east?
It depends who you talk to. I mean, a lot of Christians don't like getting into this because in the Old Testament, if you're involved in the dark arts, you are to be put to death. I think that's Leviticus. Sounds about right. I would say, who knows the percentage, but a lot of biblical scholars say these guys are part of the occult.
Well, where's the east? They say you're coming from the east.
Persia, that direction. We did some walking. The Persians are interesting people. But what do you think about that? This is part of the story, right? They didn't keep reminding yourself, these stories are here for a reason. They're doing theology. Now, did wise men from the east come and see the Christ child? I don't know, maybe not, doesn't matter. They're trying to say something by putting this story into this place.
Were they trying to link it with something in the Old Testament?
Yeah, what do you think that might be?
Well, I don't know the Old Testament.
Well, for crying out loud, Karen. And God said to Abraham, I will bless you, you will become a blessing, and through you all the nations of the earth will bless themselves. That is Genesis chapter 12. That's the Abrahamic covenant. It includes God's people, the Hebrews at that point, the Jews. But it also includes what? All the nations of the earth
Gentiles.
will bless themselves, right? The promise, the first covenant to Abraham had to do with blessing a particular people for a particular task, but it will involve everyone. Yeah? You good with that? Okay. So here we've got wise men from the east. Here they come.
Was it a popular belief back then that
Mm-hmm.
they all,
Stargazers.
okay,
Is that what you're driving
but
at?
that the people would have honored wise men or psychics?
Yeah, they're.
So they're putting it in there so that the people will believe it more, or?
Well, what is it, have you heard of like the 4 spiritual laws that was big when I was a kid in high school in Michigan? And there's steps. First, you're a sinner, and second, you admit you're a sinner, you ask for God's forgiveness, and boom, you're a Christian, you're going to go to heaven. So I wasn't really paying attention. But you pray the sinner's prayer. Have you heard that before? You believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved. This has to do with who's in and who's out. So you have to go through this process in order to be a legitimate person of God. This story says, hang that. They're not doing this. They're looking at the stars, right? There's something peculiar in the sky. They are using what they've got to get them to the Christ. So what they're saying here is God uses whatever we've got to move us to the Christ. Do you buy that? Conservative Christians don't buy that. because you have to do it this way. Boom, boom, boom. Did you do that? Did you say the sinner's prayer? Well, then you're going to hell, which I think might be interesting. But, well, it's warm, but I'm told. This story is saying it's totally legitimate for a person to use what they have culturally, how they understand philosophy, how they understand the world, how they understand religion, how they understand the universe. That will get you. That is good enough to get you to the Christ. You see the story? You get it? What do you think of it? I mean, we've talked about this before too, this little process of, is that a fair reading of the text? We've talked about this before, right? Am I being fair to the text, you think? Right now? Let's say it with a little more enthusiasm.
Yes.
Is it true? Is the story true? Can God use what people have innately and cultivate and move them? It's good enough, it's sufficient. It is sufficient to get you to Bethlehem. You
Yes.
think that's right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and what are you going to do about it? What some people have done about it, and we're going to have missionaries coming in a couple weeks, a couple Sundays. Their names go in and out. Oh my God.
Aaron and Holly.
Yeah, they're coming. The Hickses. Anyway, if you're a missionary and you're going overseas or going to a different culture, there are two ways of looking at what do you do when you get there. One is to scrap everything you know. You guys don't know anything. You're just, whatever. You're completely wrong about everything. That's one way to do missions. And after we scrape all that off of you, then we'll teach you the real stuff, including market capitalism, strangely. Right? Or, that's one way to do missions. Another way to do missions is to say, what is it about that culture that is congenial to Christianity, to Jesus? You see where I'm going with this? And for my money, the Reformed Church, I'm a Reformed Church minister, the Reformed Church has always done that. And partly because of this story.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is it true for you? Are there things in your life that are congenial to Christ? Does it work for you too? Works for me.
I definitely think that, the beginning of the New Testament is about the change in the way believers practice. It's more about a personal relationship, not the rules and regulations,
That's
so you
right.
don't get where
That's
you're
right.
going.
That's right.
So that is over. In the beginning of Matthew, I think the groundwork is being laid for. There's way more to this than the rule book. And I think that's a really good example. The angels appeared to Joseph, the angels appeared to whatever. That's somewhat Old Testament-y,
Yeah.
but the Magi had that sense
Yep.
that I need to go, I need to follow. And I think that gets elaborated and explored as we go through the New Testament. And at the end of it, hopefully we realize the rule book is never going to get me where I need to go. It has to be about my relationship and heart attitude. And I think this is really a very good, strong beginning.
You've been-
Whether the story's 100% true or not, the kernel is they followed something in their heart
Yeah.
and brought it
Yeah.
back
Right.
based on.
Preach it, sister. You got it. You got it. Pat, typically when a new person comes, they're not allowed to speak. But go ahead. That's true. Yeah. So you're representing St. Paul by that. Because if there was ever a rule type of person, rule follower, it was St. Paul, and it got him nowhere.
Right.
He was a miserable wretch. He did everything right. Don't we know people like that? Maybe you feel that way yourself. I don't. Because I screw up all the time. Can I say that here in this interview? See, I've done it again. You can try for perfection. And there's nothing wrong with that. To be a good person, to do the right thing, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if that's all there is, misery. Because one thing that you're not going to have is compassion for other people who can't put, and we know about that, right? We know people like that. They've got their life absolutely in order, and they can't stand other people because they're flawed. You see what I mean? That's St. Paul. And it's not working. Yeah, he's getting angrier and angrier and resentful, and he's just a mess. But he's doing the commandments. So then what happens to the commandments? What happens to the rule book? Where's it go? Where's a good spot for it? If it's not up front, like I'm going to prove myself, see I'm a good person, you go to the pearly gates and there's St. Peter and you lay out your case, I did this, I was terrific, I was blah, right, blah, blah, blah. If you're not going to do that, then where is the place of the law, the rule book? Where you just throw it out?
No.
What's the proper place for it? You guys are all going to be Calvinists after this is done.
It's hanging on the wall back
Right there. Yeah, they're right there.
But didn't Jesus address that also and said something about, there's only two, love God and love your neighbor?
I should love yourself.
So I think that Jesus was saying, there are good rules to live by, and don't forget them, but it's not everything.
In our liturgy and in Protestantism in general, the Reformed Church in particular, we move the rule book to the end in the place of gratitude. So in other words, I've been freed by Christ, been loved by Christ, whether I earned it or not. It's grace, and therefore my response will be to love God, to love my neighbor, and to love as I love myself. That's where the rule book is at the end, not at the beginning. Right? If a person is driven by rules in the beginning, you become a neurotic wretch. You can, at least. But you also don't, so we're going to move that to the back, to gratitude. Does that make sense? So we still have a shaping of our lives, and what's the right thing to do. It's not a free-for-all. There's got to be some kind of, you see, does that make kind of more sense too? Okay.
I think that the rule book serves to show us grace, because if I'm trying to do everything that's in the rules, as you say, we fail, and you become miserable, and you almost, I think, want to say, this isn't worth it, why would I be doing this? So I think the rightful place is gratitude, because the New Testament brings us grace, abounding, and that's what gets us to that fuller relationship. So the rules are there, they'll always be there, but they serve to remind us that without grace, I don't think we would ever be ending up. We wouldn't have any gratitude. We'd only have anger and frustration.
Disappointment.
But somewhere in this New Testament, grace is woven in, and we realize, oh my gosh, this is the answer.
Yeah, exactly. And grace, I mean, some people are Christians are tough on the Old Testament because that's the angry God, that's the God of laws, and so on. And what I've said here a number of times is how I see the Old Testament is kind of like a coal mine, but it's got this vein of gold running through it. And there is grace to be found in the Old Testament. And it presages the stories in the New Testament. You get little flashes of grace in the Old Testament where people aren't going to get what they've got coming to them. You see? And so, and it kind of moves that way. So theologians, theologians have said things like, well, Jesus is like Noah because he saves, right? They'll make allusions to these stories of grace found in the Old Testament and put it onto Jesus. They do that a lot. So anyway, so these three are going by their own lights, and it works. God works with them, through them. There's enough of God's Spirit in them to get them to where they're going. I think the story is saying that there is something of God in all of us. So, right, yes? No? No?
That's an awful responsibility.
There's some spark of divinity in all of us. Whether you know it or not, it's already in there. So wouldn't it then be important for us to get to the place of acknowledging it? You see what I mean? That's and speak it and own it. Yeah? Okay. All right, so let's move on and talk about Herod. So we change of pace. Herod, by the way, there's a family of Herods in Palestine. There's a bunch of them. They're all related. And they all have one thing in common, and that is they are unbelievably paranoid, ruthless people. They're horrible human beings, the Herods. And so we're going to bump into one here. So the wise men, I don't know how wise it is to go to Herod, and it's always sort of been a funny story that way. The wise men are going to go to Herod. How wise is that?
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, so Herod, and this Herod, like all the others, is paranoid. He gets the message from the wise men that there's a competitor to be born. Competition. That does not sit well with any Herods. They are going to kill off the competition. I mean, Vladimir Putin, I'm sure, loves this story. He loves killing off competition. But so we've got a situation where joy is going to be very short-lived. And there are people in the world who want to kill off the promise. Theologians have talked about the spirit of Herod is also in every person. Has that ever happened to you? Or have you ever experienced you've got a dream about your life and someone is going to try to kill it? Has that ever happened? Do you know anybody like that? Where they kill? Martin Luther King comes to mind. Literally, I had a dream. No, you don't. You're dead. That's the spirit of Herod. Spirit of Herod. A lot of us have dreams about our lives. Of course, I've met every one of mine. And but so many times we have a dream and there's something in us that conspires to kill it. Maybe old tapes that we got from our parents or our families, You know that, right? I mean, there so many people are so talented and so gifted, and you can kind of see them bump up against something, and they drop out, or they quit, or they can't move forward past a certain line. That's the spirit of God. Okay? And as a friend, even to yourself, you have to love yourself as your neighbor, as you want to love your neighbor. You know, it's good to take a look at that. You know, what promise, what value, what gifts do I have, and how can they be employed, knowing that, you know, you might have pushback from Herod when it happens. Is there another time in the Bible where you get to this place where it's like, finally, we've got some joy here, we've got some happiness? And, you know, in mid-sentence, it falls apart. Does anybody have an example where this is similar? Because they're also making a bridge here with this story. They're making a little bridge. Abraham and Isaac. Right? Abraham and Sarah are barren for year after year, decades after decade. And they get this promise from God, you're going to have a child, ho, ho, ho. And that child will be an heir to, you know, there'll be so many, eventually they'll be like salmon on the beach. And okay, this child is born, he's now a teenager, which I guess it makes sense to kill a teenager. But right when, the name Isaac means laughter. So this kid, this promise, is taken up the mountain, and his dad is going to kill him up there because God told him so. That is a similar story, don't you think, to this one? After all this waiting for a promised child, after all this waiting for a promised Messiah, guess what? Here comes Herod. He's going to kill joy, you know, a killjoy. You see that? And if you were in the first century and you were a Jewish Christian, listening to Matthew, that would immediately, the reader or a hearer immediately would think of that story over here with Abraham and Isaac. Immediately. We've heard that before. Well, there's similarities again. Okay? You doing all right? All right. Great. So can we go from 7 to 12? Somebody want to help out with that?
No takers?
Out loud.
Okay. Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
Okay, thank you. So they, with what they had, as far as navigations, so to speak, it got them to the right place. Yes? All right. And then Herod, I thought it was very nice of Herod to say, yeah, I'm going to go. And, you know, pay homage to my competitor. I thought that was very sweet of him. I'm kidding. He's going to kill this kid. Yeah, this is what's called realpolitik. You know that? You know that word, realpolitik? It's winning no matter what. No matter what it takes. And okay, so they had a dream, so they're not going to go back and report to Herod. But they drop off 3 gifts. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold is kind of, sort of explains itself, what they would use the gold for. Right? What about frankincense and myrrh? Kind of a strange thing to give.
They were used to embalm.
Right. Frankincense and myrrh are embalming fluids that they used.
Now, I remember you picking on Larry.
Yes, I did. Clear the record. Yes, I did. So Larry would show up at Bethlehem, drop off. What do you think about that? I mean, it's obvious that they're frankincense and myrrh. It's obvious these are embalming fluids. You know, I mean, we had a baby shower with the
Were they used
last
for
week.
anything else?
No.
Nothing else?
Mm-mm.
They weren't used?
So the wise men were, well, they were wise men, or they told the future or something, and they were portending Jesus' death.
There you go. Everybody get that?
They're predicting.
This kid is born to die.
You think Mary understood that?
Mm-hmm. It's really shocking, really, really shocking. It's I think the second most important day of the Christian calendar is Good Friday.
Yes.
For me, that's my own personal. Yeah. We've talked about, too, where Jesus is born. In a stable, right? He's probably not born in the regular stable with the household animals. He's born in a special little stable that's usually connected to a house. And that's what's in that little stable are all the animals for sacrifice. So we're getting the gist here. This child of promise that we've been waiting for forever. The end game is him dying. Yeah. It's really sobering. It's a really sobering story, I think. It's for me. Yeah. At a baby shower, Larry House shows up. And Larry's lovely, of course. Okay. So why don't we get this family and get them out of there and go into Egypt? Would someone read 13 through 18, please?
Out loud?
Do so.
Now, after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentations, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they were no more. Who's Rachel?
I have to look. It's in Jeremiah 31. Well, okay. We've talked about bridges being built back and forth. What is this? This is the second Joseph, right? We have a Joseph in the Old Testament in Exodus, and we've got this one. What are some of the similarities now that you can?
They're both dreamers.
Right.
And they both save their family.
Yeah.
And they both go to Egypt.
They both go to Egypt. What about the killings?
About what?
The killings. Are there killings going on in Exodus?
Yes.
Which is it? What was
The
the one?
Pharaoh killing the boys.
Yeah, big pieces of the Old Testament story are now moved over to the New Testament. See? Things are always happening in the Old Testament and in the New Testament and in our own lives, I think, where the story of God is going to be challenged, it's going to be tried to be killed off, destroyed. And that's true. I don't want anyone else to get paranoid, but that's just the way it is. The story of God in you, the story of God in me, the story of God in the people we meet during our days. God's intention is for that story to keep going in us. And there are things that happen internally and externally to us that try to kill that story or mute it. And we see it all the time. We see it all the time. So is there hope? Is there hope?
I hope so. There's hope.
Yeah, got it, right? And I think the Bible, one of the things I love about it, it's realistic in this sense. I mean, yes, we're not. This isn't a fairyland that we're living. This is real life. Real things happen. Disappointments happen, but God is in charge of this thread of history, writ large about the Messiah, but in a smaller way, but still significant in your life. God is going to work that story through to a positive end, even if it's hard. You believe that?
I want to.
Oh, good. Yeah, me too. I mean, that's faith, right? That's faith, you know. And it's not faith like, you know, it's never happened. The Bible is given to us to show us. We're not the first ones to go through this. We won't be the last ones to go through it. But God does successfully move God's story through history, including our own, where there will be a redemptive end. Okay? And when things are dark, you know, it takes faith to acknowledge that. We try to do that every Sunday morning, or maybe every morning. The best of us do it every morning. We acknowledge that God is in control of history, even if I don't understand it.
Something that's kind of always bothered me about this is why, and I have no idea why, I don't think you do, why do artists through the ages, and even we do it today in the church, why do we insist on portraying the wise man coming that he's a baby? Because he obviously was a child, he was not a baby, because they even know by the time they got there, the route they couldn't have gotten there when he was a baby. So why did that kind of get, put through art and,
Yeah, it's not historically accurate
Yeah.
depiction, right?
I mean, just like, when we had the little tableaus with the kids, we got Mary sitting there with the baby, and here comes the wise men. We kind of make that still happen. Instead of, saying he wasn't he was a child.
Are they kind of maybe packing in a lot of the story into a moment? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, if you go to Italy, what you'll see is you see the angel Gabriel impregnating Mary in her ear. Well, of all people, Italians know that's not how it works. But they're trying to say something, that when God speaks, the impossible can happen. That's what that painting is trying to portray. With these other ones, I don't know, maybe it's like an accordion. You take an accordion of pictures and images, and you gotta make some choices.
And you would think there would have been some artist that would, obviously, would have been a Christian, they would have read the Bible and known the accurate.
Oh, they all know the Bible.
And
They
say,
know
"Wait a
these
minute,
stories."
I can't make this picture that
Oh, yeah.
way, but it just seems every one you look at,
Yeah.
that's,
He's not three.
I never thought of that, but you're right.
Yeah.
The first time I was like, one of those things, like blows things away for you, and somebody,
Yeah.
like, what do you mean, there's no Santa Claus? He wasn't a baby? It's like the same type of thing.
Right.
Because too, if you think about it, they went to Bethlehem because there was a census, right? And they had a,
There wasn't, by the way, but yes, that's the story.
well, that's their
Yeah.
way of justifying why they left wherever.
That's right. That's how you get them to Bethlehem.
Bethlehem. But the baby was born, now they're not gonna stay there in this manger for 2 years. Of course, they would have gotten on that
Right.
donkey and went
Right.
back up.
Right. So you have to keep going back. If it's a story like that and the story starts breaking down, you have to go to another place, and that is, this is then a theological story that's trying to tell me something theological. You get it? There should be a little switch in your head. If it doesn't hold together, because we're all adults here, right?
Right.
If it doesn't hold together, or also we have, back in the day, we had a harmonization of the Gospels. There were books written to harmonize. It's ridiculous. They don't harmonize. They don't harmonize. That's a fool's mission. So then, if they don't harmonize, you got to get to the place. Well, maybe there's mistakes, or there's stylistic issues, or there's theology being offered here. It's not supposed to be history. It's supposed to be theology. We have to be, in other words, we have to be concerned about the truth telling. That's the point of the Bible. Right? That's the point of it.
So don't dive deep into the details.
Unless the details are written for you to know the details. You have to. This is form criticism is what we call this. You have to know the form. Music is just like this too, right? You have to know the kind of music, the form, in order to perform it, right? That, if you play jazz like you would a classical piece that falls to beat, you have to respect the form. I would also say that with people, we all have forms too. If you want to be a good listener, we talk about this in Stephen ministry. If you want to be a good listener, you have to take that form, what's being said, as it's being offered. You can't make it into something else. It's like reading the difference between reading a novel and a poem. You have to respect the genre of literature, and that is doubly, I think, the case in the Bible. And you can get yourself into some real trouble if you don't. And people have. I mean, I won't get into it, but we will at 12:30 get into it in my other class. But yeah, if you misread the Bible in certain spots, you are going to create hell on earth.
And that is, I think, what happens. People want to say the Bible is a historical record.
That's right.
It is not. That guy, that commentator, Bill O'Reilly, he's done all these books, and his focus is to get the history accurate. So I've read his one on Finding Jesus. I don't care about what historical facts you found about where he lived, where he walked, what he said, because your books say nothing about what he came here to teach.
Right. There's no truth telling.
And the illumination of the Bible is for the theology,
Right.
for the history.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I forget who said it, but somebody said, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant." Who said that? It was a female poet. Give me a good one.
Maya Angelou.
No, further back than that. If I hear it, it'll tell the truth, but tell it slant. And that's what we're talking about. That's the meaning part. When I write a eulogy, I'm not going to have a recitation of, they worked here, they worked here, they worked here. Yep, that's what they did. Terrific. Larry? You're next. That's not a eulogy. You have to get to the point where you have to take all that in. That's important. What a person did and, what they were like and all that. But I think a good eulogy is when you get to the point of what was this life about? What was this about? And if you can do that, eulogy means blessing. That person is going to be blessed because you've gone past the bare facts and you've gotten to the place of meaning. This is what this life meant. No, it doesn't mean that you're going to get it right. You hope to. But I've just done 33 of them in 6 months.
But isn't that human nature, though, that we're all very cynical and we want the intelligent understanding, therefore we're not big on faith or whatever it is. I'm trying to think of my own experience. I was raised a Catholic and never absorbed anything from that. And, when I first met you, and you gave such a different slant, that was the first time I had ever even imagined the concept that God liked me, because I thought, he didn't like me, I'm out, good enough. And then he made me think, oh my gosh, really, there's a God that likes me and accepts me as I am? That was such a different twist. But then I still could not accept it all. I could not, and I wanted to know, is it real? So I think that's the human nature, is I want to know facts. And so I did start reading books on, historical validation that Jesus existed. I needed those truthful facts to allow me to, okay, maybe I will read it and maybe I will have faith. So I think that that's more common than not.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Especially in the Western world.
Yeah.
In the Western world, no question. We want to know when, where, how.
Right.
How. These are big questions for Westerners. Where Westerners struggle is why. The issue of meaning is not our best suit. Westerners struggle with meaning, I think. Whereas other cultures do a lot better. They're more into meaning than, give me the, when, how, the engineering. And we struggle with meaning. And you can see it in our society, in other Western societies too. You can see it. They're struggling. Who are you? Right? Why do you exist? What is your purpose in this life? Westerners really struggle with that stuff. Where do you go to find that out? Well, I think there's a lot of help with the scriptures and with the good news of Christ. At least you can answer, I'm not my own, but I belong, body and soul, and life and death, to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ. That's who I am. Right? That's Heidelberg Catechism, question and answer number 1. Yeah, but I'd stake my life on that. Who are you?
I have such trouble, though, defending my faith if somebody challenges me, because I don't know how to put it into words. But an example, my son will say, well, Ma, that book, it's not real, and they don't even know who wrote in that, it's all. And I don't know how to respond other than...
I can help you. Jesus Christ was born in Bethlehem, died in Jerusalem, and was raised from the dead, and 500 people saw it. And his disciples went from being not men, but mice. They went from that, being terrified, to risking their absolute lives so that people could know that happened. Now, you may not believe that, and then we're done. We're done. If you don't believe the resurrection, you don't believe the accounts of the resurrection, man, we're done. You're right. You're right. You see what I mean? But yeah, if it's here's Larry.
Another funeral.
Larry, we were just talking about you and how you bring to Jesus frankincense and myrrh. You're on speakerphone, by the way. Yes, you are. What do you got to say?
And you have a quick wit.
Yeah, thanks.
Are you in the middle of something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Can I call you back?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. Well, nice to hear your voice. I'll call you in a couple minutes.
Perfect, thank you.
Okie dokie. See?
Another one bites the dust.
Yeah, I spoke too soon, didn't I? Yeah, I spoke too soon.
34 is coming.
34 is coming. Okay. Yeah. So I think we've done enough for today. Pat, thanks for coming in. And, you added a lot to our discussion. Anybody else want to say something before we go?
You know how Lynn's doing?
Not great. Not great. Yeah. And nor is Jim. Yeah. Yeah, we're hurting pups at Lyall right now. Got some high. Yeah. So.
Maybe we're in retrograde.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Godspeed, I said.
Amen.
Do you want this back? I don't want to take it.
Yeah.